Students, today I'm going to talk about deontology, focusing on Kant and on W.D. Ross. We go back one. So by the end of this, you should be able to identify what deontology is, the main differences between Kant and Ross, and explain how, particularly on the foundations of ethics, why humanity should be cherished. Should be able to explain, identify, and apply correctly the two main formulas of the categorical imperative, and then assess and explain strengths and objections to Kant's theory. We're going to focus on Kant on the moral permissibility of suicide, prostitution, marital sexual relations, and polygamy. And finally, you'll be able to explain W.D. Ross on prima facie duties and the foundation of duties, according to Ross. So this is our cherished philosopher, Kant. He taught many things in his lifetime. He was born in 1724 and died in 1804. He never married. He lived in his hometown, which is now Kaliningrad, which is a Russian enclave. He was a scholar, so he was both a tutor and eventually got a professor appointment at a university. His alignment is lawful. You can decide for yourself his moral alignment as we go along. He's famous for both his moral philosophy and his metaphysical and epistemological philosophy. He did not venture purportedly further than 60 miles from his hometown. And it's told that the people in his hometown set their clocks by his regular 4 o'clock walks. This is where Kaliningrad is. You can see it highlighted in the center. Recently, a statue of Kant was attacked to vent some anti-German sentiment by the Russians in Kaliningrad. So we'll give him for his character, for our role-playing game that we've been ongoing, moral rigidity at +3, intellectual flexibility at +2, and his constitution, given his daily constitutional, meaning his walk, we give him a +2. So deontology means the ethics that has to do with duty. And deontological theories are non-consequentialist theories. So whether something is good or bad is not dependent on the consequences, but on whether someone has fulfilled their moral duties. It focuses on both the intention to do the right thing and the act itself, which has to be the right thing to do. So in the continuum of action, we are at the first and second, at the motive to do the right thing and the act of doing the right thing itself. Some deontological theories are absolutist, meaning they apply, some duties apply without any exceptions. For example, Kant holds that one should never commit suicide. Now, non-absolutist theories such as Ross's theory hold that duties are not absolute. Competing moral duties do arise, and which duty is more important is in that situation is something that one has to ponder and reflect on, given one's moral intuition and moral support. So that's Ross. So we'll start with Kant's deontology. He believed that the foundation of ethics was the human goodwill. His idea was that if humans vanished from the face of the earth, then goodwill, or what is ethical, would also vanish from the universe. He believed that ethics arise from the human ability to reason with values. So I want you to start your inquiry into deontology by an active reflection exercise. So for you, do you think there are any absolute moral duties or rules? If so, what are they, and why are they always required, or why are some acts always impermissible? If not, why not? If you can't think of any right offhand, I want to remind you of the ones that that Aristotle noted, which is murdering, adultery, and I can't think of the third one at the moment, but that'll give you two to wrestle with. Kant is trying to explain how the foundations are reasoning and willing to do the right thing by the unsympathetic bystander thought experiment. So what he's doing here is he's going to give a thought experiment in which you compare somebody who is acting from sympathy, a person who is naturally finds an inner satisfaction in spreading joy. Okay, so compare this person who just loves being joyful to others versus the person who is acting solely from duty. This is what he imagines. This person has been a friend to mankind, but his mind has become clouded by a sorrow of his own that has extinguished all feeling for how others are faring. He tears himself out of his deadened sensibility and acts charitably, purely from duty. So here we go. We've got the unsympathetic bystander who forces himself, wills himself, given reason to give to charity, whereas the person who does it out of the inner satisfaction and spreading joy. Now, which do you think Kant thinks is doing the right thing? Do you agree or disagree with Kant that acting from an inner desire to spread joy has no real true moral worth, however amiable it may be? Do you agree or disagree with Kant that the person acting out of duty is acting morally because they are doing the right thing, because they recognize the humanity in another and reasoned about this morally? So who do you agree with Kant that the unsympathetic bystander who makes himself act is doing the right thing, but the person who does it because it brings them joy is not necessarily doing the right thing? So to introduce you a little more to Kant, I'm going to read a plaque on Kant's grave. Quote, two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe, the oftener and the more steadily we reflect on them, the starry heavens above and the moral law within. So this is his own words. So let's try to think along with Kant on why we should really cherish the humanity within all others. So for Kant, humanity within us consists in our moral autonomy, this will to do the right thing, the will to do good. And what this consists in for him is the ability to impose an objective moral law upon oneself. So moral autonomy requires being able to apply self-correction and to reason to what is the right thing to do and to make oneself will to do the right thing. So it has to do with the goodwill and also has to do with rationality, like reasoning well. So we must respect the inner humanity of all other humans and afford them their moral space. First, humans have autonomy. They are ends in themselves, is what Kant calls them. So autonomy or will comes from humans having goals within them, ends within them. These ends are available internally to the person mentally, unlike we imagine most other animals. So I want you to think for yourself. So this is just a quick reflection. What is your goal for being in college? Why are you in college? Well, that desire or goal, whatever motivates you to be in college, that is an end within yourself. Okay? So for Kant, humans have intrinsic value. All behavior that affects other humans requires consideration of the humanity within the others. Okay, so we have to think about the subjective experience of being a human for other humans, as well as for ourselves. The subjective experience is what it's like to be a person. Okay, I care to wager that being a person is complicated. It includes emotions, moods, thoughts, mental states, cognizances, perceptions, desires, feelings, etc. Let me give you an example. Okay, so internally, some people really enjoy the experience of tasting cilantro, but some people really don't like the taste. It tastes like soap to them. Okay, so that is different subjective experiences. So humans are subjects of a life, not just objects in one's life. Okay, I want to think about how you might treat an object. Okay, like a wall. Okay, so you could draw on the wall, or you could paint the wall if you so desired. But this is very different from how you would treat, say, grandma or some cherished community member. Okay, grandma passes out, falls asleep. Sorry, at the table at Thanksgiving. You're not gonna draw a little mustache on her face, because that would be treating her like an object and being disrespectful. So one may draw on a wall without the consent of the wall, but one would never treat your grandma this way. Okay, don't draw on your grandma. So Kant's honoring of humanity results in egalitarianism. If there is one rule, any rule whatsoever, then that rule applies to everyone equally. Okay, so it's egalitarian in the idea the rules apply equally. So if the rule is do not murder, that applies to every member of humanity, so everyone. You should, according to Kant, really treat humans equally, wonderfully. Each human is worthy of much more special treatment than, say, animals, which Kant thinks of sort of as automatons, or like little robots that are just acting on instinct. Okay, but he really does recognize the sort of inner qualities that make humans so special. We have agency, we have self-control, we have heightened moral, intellectual, and social experiences. We have rational and we have moral capacities. These are all things that make humans worthy of cherishing, okay? Worthy of considering that the moral law within us, our ability to exercise self-control and act upon principle to will the good for all humanity and for specific humanity, this is what makes us special. Equality requires one to apply ideal standards to oneself, just as we might show great respect to somebody that we honor. We should honor ourselves as well, particularly in thinking about ourselves as living across time and us having duties potentially to the best version of ourselves that we can make, or our future self. So treat yourself as a being deserving of respect. Rationality requires wanting the best life for yourself in the future. So pick all and only the reasons that support that one should cherish humanity for Kant. A, humans have the ability to apply the moral law to themselves. B, humans are subject of a life. C, humans have intrinsic worth. And D, humans are cherished by other humans. Match the term with the closest meaning given Kant's idea of humanity. So intrinsic value, subjective experience, or instrumental value. A, inherent worth. B, how it is to exist as a perceiving, conceiving, willing being, or C, worthy as a means to an end. True or false, are all deontological theories consequentialists? True or false, some deontological theories are non-absolutist. So what is Kant's concept of egalitarianism? Pick all and only right answers. People are equal to animals. Rules apply equally. Apply ideal standards to oneself. All life is worthy of equal status, and every human is worthy. Now I'm going to explain, his main principle is called the categorical imperative, okay? And we'll look at two formulations of his main principle. But before we do that, I want to explain how we get to categorical imperatives. So I'm going to explain what a hypothetical imperative is. So a hypothetical is a term we use for conditional sentences, which are sentences that use the structure of if-then, okay, or words that mean if-then. So that's what we call a hypothetical or conditional statement. For example, if there is a mural, then one can take a selfie there. So that's an if-then sentence. Next, we're going to talk about what an imperative is. An imperative is a command. In English, a command normally begins with a verb like close the door, okay? So a hypothetical imperative expresses an if-then sentence, okay? But the if part states the condition which must apply, right, for the imperative to apply. So it states an imperative after the if, and it's, after the if, and it states a hypothesis, after the then, and it states a hypothesis or a condition after the if. So if you want a mural there, sign a petition. So the imperative sign a petition only applies if the hypothetical, right, if you want a mural there, applies to you. Okay, if it doesn't, then you wouldn't sign the petition. So hypothetical imperatives only apply when the condition stated before the then applies. Again, if you have no preference, for example, about a mural, then there's no imperative to sign a petition to get it done. So moral imperatives are not hypothetical, okay? So they tell one what one ought to do, what one must necessarily do, rather than what one should do if one so is inclined, okay? So the categorical imperative says there's no hypothetical part. It's categorical, meaning if there is a imperative, then it applies to everybody equally under similar conditions. So his categorical imperative offers, we're going to look at two main formulations, and each part will support with sort of focus on different reasonings, the same conclusion whether one must do something or must not do something. Perfect duty. Okay, that's what we call a perfect duty. So one must do something or must not do something. Or if it is an imperfect duty, one may permissibly do something or may not permissibly do something. So I'm going to read you the actual formulas, and then I'm going to talk it through more slowly with you so that you get a good understanding of every part of it. So the universal formula is the first one, and this one says, act only in accordance with the maxim through which you can, at the same time, will that it become a universal law. Okay? So act in accordance. Remember, I hope you remember what a general maxim is. Okay. So in this, it's gonna give you a description of an action with a normative principle attached. That's what a maxim is. And the idea is if you can will it universally, then that's how you should act according to that maxim. The next one is basically, I'm going to read it aloud, and let's say the basic shorthand version, which is easier to say than the universal formula. So act, this is the end, and it's the end in themselves formula. So act or you use humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means. So don't use people. Don't use yourself either as a less than rational agent. So perfect duties according to Kant, so ones that you absolutely have to do or never can do: never lie, never commit suicide, and don't maim oneself. Imperfect or non-absolute duties include it's your duty to be charitable, sometimes in some way, no specifics given. So active reflection exercise: are there any perfect duties? If so, are they all negative? Meaning, do they say what one ought not to do? Do you agree with Kant that one should be charitable as a matter of habit, but not as a matter of any particular given situation? So match the type to the example of it. We're going to look for hypotheticals, hypothetical imperatives, and imperatives. So number one, apply for aid. 2, if 2 more people add, then the class will have 16 students. 3, if you want tea, make it yourself. Multiple choice. So which is the categorical imperative? The end in itself formula, the universal formula, both of the above, or none of the above. Now we're going to break down the universal formula into different application questions, and this will help guide your reasoning as you're trying to apply Kantian reasoning to specific cases, okay? So first, I want you to ask yourself if you could, for any situation, will this as a universal law. So whenever anyone is in a situation, should they follow the principle that this is permissible or necessary to do? Given this idea that this is going to be a universal law, and I want you to think of this as like a universal law, like a law of nature. So this is just how people are going to behave now, okay? So what kind of world would this be like if this behavior was as natural as other laws of nature, like gravity? Does the reasoning, ethical reasoning, imply a contradiction? Does it point towards, right, a one norm that says do this and both don't do this, okay, which would be a contradiction? Broaden the perspective that you have when you're implying the universal law. Ask yourself, well, how would I feel if my own family acted this way, or my colleagues, or my friends? Would you want this done to you by those that you love, or by anyone? Would you want to do this to those you love, or anyone worthy of love? And again, for Kant, everyone is worthy of agape, or this sort of universal respect and love, because of their mere humanity. So Kant uses the example of the universal formula. In this case, we're going to talk about suicide for the next little bit. And this is his example of a universal duty using the universal formula. So here's the description of the situation. And we would imagine anyone in a situation similar to this is the idea. So a man who has been brought by a series of troubles to a point of despair and of weariness with life still has his reasons sufficiently to ask himself, would it be contrary to my duty to myself to take my own life? Could the maxim of my action in killing myself become a universal law of nature? Well, here is his maxim. For love of myself, I make it my principle to cut my life short when prolonging it threatens to bring more troubles than satisfaction. So the question is whether this principle of self-love could become a universal law of nature. If it did, that would be a nature that had a law according to which a single feeling created a life-affirming push and also led to the destruction of life itself. And we can see at a glance that such a nature would contradict itself. And so it couldn't be a nature. So the maxim we are discussing couldn't be a law of nature, and therefore would be utterly in conflict with the supreme principle of duty. So that is Kant applying the universal formula to a suicidal man. So here we go. This is just breaking it down to make it a little bit easier to see, right? So he's saying, suppose a person is contemplating suicide and asks himself whether it would be immoral or contrary to duty for him to take his own life. Kant states that the question to ask himself is whether committing this act, when so desolate, would become a universal law of nature. So the only way it could be is if it could always act that way. But for him, self-love, which is a principle or the maxim they're acting on in this situation, creates a contradiction. It points one towards both affirming one's life and also destroying one's life. And that's a contradiction. So this is what we call the contradiction test that results from applying the universal formula in some cases. If the reasoning implies a contradiction, then it cannot be a universal rule that could be applied to everyone in every similar situation. So it couldn't be a universal rule that people, when desolate, commit suicide. So we can imagine it using this diagram. We've got one arrow pointing to promoting and sustaining life from the principle of loving oneself, or the value of that, and the other to promote or ending one's life. So self-love, this is the contradiction, cannot promote conflicting ends, sustaining and improving oneself and ending one's life. So that's Kant's reasoning. I'm going to read this to you, and this is your active learning exercise. Answer the following questions after I read you this passage on false promises. So Kant says, another man sees himself being driven by need to borrow money. He realizes that no one will lend to him unless he firmly promises to repay it at a certain time. And he's well aware that he won't be able to keep such a promise. So the maxim of his action will run like this. When I think I need money, I will borrow and promise to repay it, although I know that that repayment won't ever happen. It may be that this principle of self-love or of personal advantage would it nicely into my whole future welfare. I'm sorry, I just lost myself in that sentence, which I either said incorrectly or I wrote incorrectly. So if my maxim became a universal law, he asks, right? So people, whenever so situated, lie, they promise to repay, but they know they're not going to do that. So if my maxim became a universal law, then how would things stand? He says, look, I can see straight off that it must contradict. For if you take a law saying that anyone who thinks he is in need can make any promises he likes without intending to keep them, and make it universal, so everyone in need does behave in this way, that would make the promise and the intended purpose of it impossible. No one would believe what was promised to him, but would only laugh at such a performance as a vain pretense. So, pick all and only what this passage implies about Kant on the moral permissibility of making a false payment out of the principle of self-love. A, this is not universalizable as a law of nature. It fails the contradiction test. B, this is not universalizable because it would make all promises impossible. C, this is universalizable because everyone makes false promises and everyone knows it. D, this is universalizable because acting only in one's personal interest makes one predictable. E, this is not universalizable because if everyone acted this way, any attempt to be promised would be laughed at as pretend. So now I want to go through applying the formula of the end in themselves. Again, I'm going to read it to you. So after you use humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means. So let's talk about treating people respectfully. So whenever somebody is about to do something, they should ask themselves, does this behavior treat humanity correctly? Is a person being used as a means to an end instead of as an independent, rational, moral agent worthy of respect and full autonomy? You should ask yourself, if you're applying the formula of the end in themselves, does this behavior treat others as ends in themselves, as rational persons with their very own goals, preferences, and moral autonomy? Is one of the persons involved in this being coerced into not being able to make their own moral decision? This can happen, for example, if you don't give people relevant information, either by lying by omission or even lying by commission, telling them falsehoods in order to get them to coerce them into a decision they wouldn't make with the actual information. Is a person's preferences not being accounted for because relevant information is being withheld? Does this treat oneself as a means solely to one's own bodily gratification rather than as an end in oneself, including, of course, your rationality? Does this treat oneself, therefore, as a rational, dignified, moral person that one wants to be? Is one treating oneself as an object instead of a rational being with humanity within? And is this being irrational about what is ultimately good for oneself and for humanity? So let's look at the same question about suicide and see how Kant reasons about this using the formula of the end in itself. So he says, someone thinking of committing suicide will, if he is guided by the concept of necessary duty to oneself, ask himself, could my suicide be reconciled with the idea of humanity as an end in itself? And his answer should be no. If he escapes from his burdensome situation by destroying himself, he's using a person merely as a means to keeping himself in a tolerable condition up to the end of his life. But a man is not a thing, so he isn't something to be used merely as a means, and must always be regarded in all his actions as an end in himself. So I can't dispose of a man by maiming, damaging, or killing him, and that includes the case where the man is myself. So focus on this. If you need to go back over it, pause the video or look at the slide in the PDF. Why, according to him, is it morally impermissible to commit suicide using the end in itself formula? Well, first, suicide makes use of a person as merely a means to maintaining a tolerable quality of life rather than the human being within. A human is not a thing, and hence not something that can be used merely as a means, even by themselves. Later on, he says, to destroy the subject of morality in his own person is tantamount to obliterating from the world, as far as he can, the very existence of morality itself. His conclusion is humans cannot, therefore, dispose of a human being in his own person by maiming, damaging, or killing it. So using these patterns of reasoning listed above, act like you're Kant, okay? And create a Kantian style argument about being against the morality of adultery. Make sure you include use of the universal formula and the formula of the end in itself. Remember to go through each question, use your imagination to think whether adultery is universalizable, and if it truly respects the humanity within others, and treats people as being worthy of their own autonomy morally. So, strengths of Kant's theory. Well, he insists his theory creates the right account of culpability, meaning one is held responsible for reasoning with goodwill to do the right thing and then doing the right thing. This leaves each person responsible for maintaining high levels of rational engagement and self-control. For deontology, if you try to do the right thing, and you did the right thing, but the consequences turned out poorly, you're only held responsible for what you intended and what you did, not for some poor moral luck with the impact that you had. By giving a high standard for human behavior, it encourages self-control and consistent moral reasoning. It encourages multiple ways of conceptualizing why the categorical imperative applies. It gives depth of moral reasoning for the different topics it tries out. One major objection to Kant's theory is that the rules are really only negative rules. They tell us what not to do more than they tell us how to do things. Another objection to Kant's ethical theory is that it seems to have a strange sense about what proper motivation for an act is. Okay? One way of putting that is that if you guide every action by respect for rational agency, this seems to be contrary to valuing the desire to behave that way. Okay, so let's go back to the unsympathetic benefactor who gives charitably because he knows it's the right thing to do, versus the person who does because their heart is bottomless. It seems like the idea of the goodwill that most of us have is more in line with the person who does good things because they enjoy doing good things. Finally, a really serious objection that occurred during Kant's time and that he actually responded to is the famous lying to the murderer objection by Benjamin Constant. So Constant argued, the moral principle, it's a duty to tell the truth, would, if taken unconditionally and singly, make any society impossible. Kant goes so far as to maintain that it would be a crime to lie to a murderer who asked us whether a friend of ours, whom he is pursuing, has taken refuge in our house. So he's saying, look, Kant will tell you, you can't ever lie because that's not treating humanity correctly. Okay, and it's not universalizable. So if a murderer was standing outside your door and your friend is inside, Kant would advise you to tell the truth. Immanuel Kant deals with this. He says, look, go backwards. Does a man have a right not to tell the truth? And he says, look, he just doubles down basically on it. He says, one is never allowed to lie. First, one cannot treat another merely as a means. If a person makes a choice without all the relevant information, they're not being treated as a free and independent decision maker with their own goals and values that need to be respected. They're essentially being coerced into a decision. So you can't lie to people because it's coercing them. One would never consent to everyone lying at any time, so it's non-universalizable. Quote, truth in utterances that cannot be avoided is a more formal duty of a man to everyone, however great the disadvantage that may arise from it or any other. And by making a false statement, I do wrong to men in general in the most essential point of duty. All rights founded on contract should lose their force and this is a wrong which is done to mankind. So that's Kant's reasoning. Can you imagine a situation in which one has the right not to tell the truth? Finally, we're going to analyze a couple of passages about Kant's reasoning on sex. So I want you to focus on what his conclusions are about polygamy and about marital sex. So let's start first. But let us pursue this aspect further and examine the case of a man who takes 2 wives. In such a case, each wife would have but half a man, although she would be giving herself wholly and ought in consequence to be entitled to the whole man. Next, matrimony is an agreement between 2 persons by which they grant each other equal reciprocal rights, each of them undertaking to surrender the whole of the person to the other with a complete right of disposal over it. We can now apprehend by reason how sexual union is possible without degrading humanity and breaking the moral laws. If I yield myself completely to another and obtain that person of the other in return, I win myself back. I've given myself up as the property of another, but in turn I take that other as my property and so win myself back again. In this way, the 2 persons become a unity of will. Whatever good or ill, joy or sorrow befall either of them, the other will share in it. Thus, sexuality leads to a union of human beings, and in that union alone, its exercise is possible. Now I want you to assess for yourself Kant's reasoning. Assess meaning tell me if it's good or bad and why, on prostitution and why prostitution is not permissible. Quote, man cannot dispose over himself because he is not a thing. He is not his own property. He's not entitled to sell a limb, not even one of his teeth, but to allow one's person for profit to be used by another for the satisfaction of sexual desire. To make of oneself an object of demand is to dispose over oneself as over a thing, and to make of oneself a thing on which another satisfies his appetite. The underlying moral principle is that man is not his own property and cannot do with his body what he will. The body is part of the self, and in its togetherness with the self, it constitutes the person. A man cannot make of his person a thing, and this is exactly what happens in prostitution. This manner of satisfying sexual desire is therefore not permitted by the rules of morality. So that was Kant, and now we're going to finish off with talking about Sir David Ross. His hometown is at the tippy top of Scotland. He was born in 1877 and died in 1971. He was a knight commander of the British Empire, so officially he was a knight. And his superpower is that he was amazing in many fields. He worked for the government during the war. In munitions, he contributed to Aristotle translations and scholarship in both philosophy, ethics, and classics. He helped scholars who were fleeing during World War II. And he created what is now known as intuitionist ethics. So we're going to give him a +3 for wisdom, +3 for courage, and a +3 for fidelity. Ross created a non-absolutist ethical theory that is still deontological. So it still focuses on trying to do the right thing and doing the right thing. But in this case, the foundations for his ethics isn't humans willing the good rationally for others. The foundation for ethics is instead more like the Stoics, and it's based on interpersonal duties. For Ross, humans are born into and exist within a web of interpersonal relations that require different moral duties and roles. Here's a quote from Ross. Someone may stand to me in the relation of a promisee to a promisor, of a creditor to a debtor, of a wife to a husband, of a child to a parent, of a friend to a friend, a fellow countryman to fellow countryman, and the like. And each of these relations is a foundation of a prima facie duty. Prima facie means on the face of it or superficial or at first glance. So examples of relations, as he mentioned, promisee and promisor, creditor and debtor, spouse and spouse, child and parent, friends and fellow countrymen. So I want you to take a minute out of your busy day and draw a diagram of the web of interpersonal duties that you yourself live within. So what are your expectations, responsibilities, and social roles that you live in interpersonally? So Ross is non-absolutist, meaning duties are not absolutely required. Duties can end up competing with each other, and one duty may take precedent at one time and another at another time. Therefore, these are what we call prima facie. These are required acts unless a stronger moral duty outweighs it. So the actual moral duty is the strongest obligation, the duty that weighs the strongest morally. So this theory holds that interpersonal duties give rise to competing values and goals. And Ross holds that one can look within, reflect, read ethics, even talk to those one morally trusts. Okay. This is the moral intuitionism part. When faced with moral dilemmas. Okay. So by reflection, by conversation with those you trust, right, you can work through these moral dilemmas. Basically, he trusts you to be able to figure out what is the actual moral duty. So these are some of the duties that he brings up, and I'm going to categorize them into different groups. First, duties based on past behavior. So those duties include, first, the duty of fidelity. So those resting on promise or what may be fairly be called an implicit promise. Next is the duty for reparations. So if you do wrong, you have the duty to make up for prior wrongful acts. Next is the duty of gratitude. So if somebody acts kindly and considerately for you, okay, particularly if they give you benefits or make things better for you, then you have the duty of gratitude, which is to express thankfulness for others' acts of kindnesses, care, and consideration. So given fidelity, reparation, and gratitude, match the duty to the type. So which one would be truthfulness? What about saying one is sorry for doing something hurtful? What about staying true to one's spouse? How about helping your grandfather because he was always there for you? Or helping your grandmother because you gave her your word? Finally saying, I appreciate you. Next are what we call ongoing duties. So these are present and continuous and include the duty of beneficence, meaning it's your duty to do good works, to help and to benefit others, to promote their good and their virtues. The duty of non-maleficence, this is the duty, of course, not to harm others physically or psychologically, also to prevent as much harm as possible. Finally, we have future-oriented duties, the duty of justice, be fair, and prevent unjust distribution of benefits and burdens, and the duty of self-improvement through education and or practice, promoting one's own good. Okay, so those are the three types. And as he puts it, so this is not all the possible duties, but these are some of the major ones. So this is not a fully extensive list according to Ross, so it can be added on as well. So match the prima facie duty to the type for gratitude, non-maleficence, justice, beneficence, and self-improvement. Also reparation and fidelity. So going to college to increase one's knowledge, helping a friend grow more virtuous, preventing a fist fight from occurring, telling no lies and making no false promises, being egalitarian, keeping a sworn secret, and publicly acknowledging and apologizing for wrongdoing. So that was our chapter on deontology.